Relationships are so important to the work that we do. Not only with the children that we serve in foster care, but with each other. I've always strived to serve community in the CASA program. We're a team, but we're also a family. And like with any other family, there are ups and downs, challenges and wins. But it's more than just the mission that drives us. It's about our love and our passion for the cause and for each other. That's what keeps us moving forward. To be a CASA, you really need to bring a passion to make a difference in the life of a child. So the work of CASA is child advocacy. And for me, that's a way of life. Just advocating for children, whether when I was teaching preschool or as a foster parent or for my own children. It's just a way of thinking about children a little differently and recognizing that children need to be heard and they need to be empowered to be able to speak up for themselves, not in a rude way, but in a way where their needs are being met. It all started in 1998 when a group of concerned citizens formed a steering committee led by Judge Kitty Curtis. Without her initiative and her leadership, child advocacy for abused and neglected children wouldn't be what it is in Flathead County.
Judge Curtis, who I think was probably the most instrumental of the judges at the time, had heard about this program and thought that it would be something that we could use in our area.
Kitty Curtis, #1, and she's humble, but she deserves so much credit for all the success of this program. It was Kitty's baby. It was her desire, and people are drawn to her. She found incredible people to work with her.
The child abuse and neglect area is one of the most difficult areas and some of the most difficult decisions that judges have to make. And it wasn't necessarily that I saw a deficiency in that area, but you just feel like with things that are that important, that the more input you can get, then the better your decision making will be. So, and it seemed to be a successful program on a national level, and so we felt like that it would enhance our handling of child abuse and neglect cases.
She's really the impetus, I think, of it all. She began reaching out into the community to find out if there was anyone, any groups, any people that were interested. And what she found was just a huge number of people were interested in helping the kids.
Then Judge Curtis formed the advisory council. And we were a program that was under the United Way umbrella until later when it became its own 501c3.
They were talking with people and finding out if people were interested, whether it was a viable thing, and so that all had happened. And so they just apparently felt that there was enough interest and there was a need. And so they wrote, Connie, I think, got the grant started, or she wrote it, Connie Leisticle, and asked the National CASA for a startup grant, a 2-year startup grant, and they got it. And then I came in after they got the grant.
I remember when I was first asked to be on the CASA board. I'd never been on a board before, but it was Kitty Curtis who asked me if I would be interested in serving, and my first response is, I've got little kids. And she said, we love kids. So I thought, well, if they can take me and my kids, I would love to serve. So that was my first board experience, and it was such a positive experience for me and my kids. Now, Kitty, it's been 20 years since you started this.
20 years.
And I'm going to say you started it because I looked up my notes so that we could kind of remember where we've come.
Right.
We're 20 years older, aren't we? But I wrote this when I was chair in 2004.
Oh,
and,
wow.
I said, you started the ball rolling in 1998. Do you remember?
Wow, 98. No, I was thinking 2000, but you're right. I mean, there was a couple of years before that, because I think 2000 was when we hired Carol Lee as the executive director. And yeah, there was a lot of work that went into it even before we got to that point.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
Why
right.
did you want CASA? Because you really fought for it. You were on a mission.
Well, I think the reason I wanted it was because there was this group of community people who were really committed and invested in the program, and I just felt like if they were that committed and focused and invested, that the judiciary should step up to the plate and provide them with the support that they needed to make this a reality.
You led that charge.
I don't know about that. I mean,
yeah, all of the judges were so supportive.
Yeah. Well, as I told Daniel, we just realized the more information we could have to try to make the best possible decisions for these children, the better. I mean, there could not be a downside to it, you know. And then it turned out that the volunteers that we had were such high quality and so committed and focused that I think we all recognized really early that it was such an asset to the community and mostly to the children.
The first child was served in 2001.
Okay.
In 2001, we served 23 children.
Wow.
2002, 54.
Oh my, double.
2003, 79.
Wow.
Then I've got all the other statistics.
Gosh,
from
I
there,
didn't
but
realize
it's just
there was such exponential growth in those really early years.
And do you remember how hard it was in the beginning because we had to fundraise?
Oh yeah, I mean
this is where I have such memories of you. Fundraising.
I mean, I told Daniel really when we in those early years, each one of us did everything that needed to be done.
Oh, I think the money memories are probably the most significant, trying to come up with new ways to raise money in the community.
I mean, to start up a program, it was all about fundraising, and we had lots of ideas, and we did we did all the work just trying to raise enough money to get the program going.
I recall that Penny was very involved with our fundraising efforts. Penny and a local pastor from Columbia Falls, Dave Merkel, put together an amazing Christmas program.
Started doing a concert every year we called the Spirit of Christmas concert because, you know, we wanted it to have the spirit and the life of the season and to really be a celebration. We didn't charge admission. We just asked people to donate if they felt moved to.
I cannot imagine the number of hours that they spent preparing. It was a very successful fundraiser.
For me, it was a family event because it took everyone in my family. to pull off the production every year, and my kids participated, sang, read poems. My husband was MC.
Such a joy that they offered to the community, and their music, their wit, their rapport between the two of them, and their overwhelming support of the CASA program.
Your mind is always on having enough money to support staff who then support the CASAs. And so it's building in the community, financially building in the community with trust.
It was always a challenge to make sure that we weren't getting ahead of ourselves, but that we also were providing as many CASA advocates as possible, because, of course, the main challenge is the rising number of abused and neglected children who desperately needed a CASA volunteer.
Kind of nice those days. I mean, maybe it hasn't changed, but I just remember that feeling of the whole community trying to support these kids,
right.
And they did, and that program grew.
Yeah.
A lot of people helped.
Like I told Daniel, it's always been a program with a lot of integrity and credibility, and that goes hand in hand with the fundraising and with the high quality of volunteers. I mean, it all works together. You can't have one of those without the others.
No. It was a good thing you started.
I remember hiring the first executive director.
I'd heard of CASA because of Missoula, but I didn't really know for sure exactly all that was entailed. And so I went to Missoula to get some training, and then they brought up somebody from Arizona. Bonnie Olson had a friend in Arizona who was at kind of the state level CASA. She came up for about a week and worked with me and went through the book and gave me a lot of suggestions and help about how to be a director and what to do.
Well, our first office space was the upstairs of where the Family Court Services was. It was one of the houses that is no longer on Main Street, down about a block from where the Justice Center is right now. We had Family Court Services down below, and a little peaked office with that we could get a desk and a printer and a computer and a couple chairs in, and that was that was our first office that we had. So it was really like being in the attic. That's the way I would describe it. But it was free. We didn't have to pay for the electricity, and we only had to pay for the phone service and some of those kinds of things.
One of the challenges was just telling people what it was. The word CASA didn't mean anything to people. We had to let the community know, because abused and neglected children was not something that we talked about. It was a system that most people just weren't even aware of. And so promoting through speaking, mostly just getting the word out, what we were doing, that there were kids in need, we needed help.
I would say the main thing is the buy-in from the community and the willingness of community members to expend their time and effort, first of all, to form the program, but then, of course, thereafter to serve as the volunteers in the CASA program, because the community volunteers are the heart and soul of the program, and without them, no CASA program can really be successful.
We were small. I was the only employee. There was a lot of support, and I guess I want to mention that I went to a couple of national conferences of CASA, and they were just good people all the way through. It was just a good organization that supported everybody, and that's kind of what I wanted to do with the volunteers, is that I wanted to support them. And so I did the recruiting, I did the background check, I did the interview, I checked references, made the decision, and then did the training. And And then it was all in person, like I think 12, 14 hours. And I know now they do some, over the computer, but it was all in person. And then they finished their training, and then they got installed by a judge. We had a ceremony for that. And then I assigned them cases because there were cases that were ready to go.
I was attending this Rotary class, like I said earlier, and Kitty Curtis was a speaker, and she was looking for people to join CASA, and she came up to me and says, "Rex, you'd be perfect with your background. I want you to join." And so, bingo, I was in the second class.
I trained actually as a volunteer after I got off the advisory council board, and I had 2 active cases with 2 children that I monitored through the system for about 3 or 4 years.
My main thing was to recruit, and I just was always impressed with the type of people that volunteered. They were just some neat people in all walks of life, and professionals and stay-at-home people and men and women, that they would take their time and they are concerned. And so I was always amazed when I put an ad in the paper, it was time to start another training. I would start getting phone calls right away, 10, 15, 20 people in 1 week were interested, and I'd send out, I had to develop an application form, which I had help from Missoula, and the woman from Arizona developed that, and everybody approved of that. And then I would, like I say, they'd have to be fingerprinted and do the background check, and then I would do they had to be screened, and I interviewed them, and they had to be able to have enough time each week to meet with the children. I guess that was the other thing I always looked for, what their motive was. And then I did the training and supervising, assigning the cases.
So I came to Casa for Kids as a volunteer, and I had the opportunity to take 2 cases in that capacity, and I loved it. And I thought maybe I could assist in the office. At that time, we had a half-time director, and it was obvious that she needed more time, more help than what was available. So I volunteered in the office, and then shortly after that, the director resigned, and they didn't have a replacement. So I was in the office volunteering and running the program, but thank goodness I had the support of Bonnie Olson. She really made it possible. She picked up a lot of things and did a lot to help train me into that role. I planned on just being there as a volunteer while they found somebody else. They did offer me the position, and I turned it down initially. But after being there a couple months in that capacity, I finally accepted the position. And I guess it worked out because I'm still here after all these years. So, yeah, I can't imagine really not, if I hadn't taken that position. I think I would have missed a huge part of my life. I'm glad I accepted it.
In 2004, we were able to bring on Jamie Campbell as our director, and she worked full-time. And so that made a tremendous impact, both because of Jamie's training, her experience in the field, and her dedication. And so that really started the program rolling.
I think the first thing that strikes me about Jamie's involvement in the program is what she brought to the table initially in terms of her personal involvement with children, and particularly with disadvantaged children.
She had been a foster mom. She'd been of her own making, her own family and mom, and she had social work background.
Her personal perspective with children and disadvantaged children and what they need allowed CASA to sort of expand its footprint, if you will.
And having Jamie come on board was a really good thing.
Jamie was very, very good at getting us on the right track and making sure that we were a fully certified, accredited program.
So when I finally did take the job, I did ask to be brought on full-time with the caveat that we would also hire a half-time person as soon as we possibly could. And they agreed to do that. So I accepted the position in December of 2004. And we brought on Lindsay as a volunteer manager.
So at that time, it was just Jamie and me in the office. We were the only two employees. We were in this tiny little office in the bottom of the Blue Building. I don't know if it's still called the Blue Building or not, but we had probably around 30 volunteers who were being assigned to cases at that time. Everything was crammed in the office. We didn't have a lot of space to meet with volunteers. And not every case that came through were we able to assign a volunteer to. So that was a lot of our goals during that time, was to be able to assign a CASA to every case that came through the court system. And that was a lot of just trying to figure out how we can have more trainings, how we can recruit more people to be involved, how we can get more press about CASA and what it is, so that people would want to volunteer. So that was a lot of our time during that.
Hi. Hi. It's good to see you too.
Welcome.
This is so
Different.
So this is where CASA used to be?
in there.
In that room
And this
right there.
was a conference room.
For family court services. Yeah.
Yeah,
This was
and
our
then we
conference
were
room.
This
able.
was a conference room, so they have
This was.
remodeled it somewhat.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me get that door for you.
Thank you. Oh, and it is the closet we knew it was.
Yes, it is. So Jamie, my desk was right here.
Yes.
And it was very tight squeeze to get
'cause
in here.
I think we had a chair here.
Yep.
I think we did. I think we had a chair. And
Yep.
then this was, because we had the L.
Yep, we had the whole L.
Well, we didn't go all the way back here, though.
Right.
I think it went...
But back
'Cause-
here where this bike is, I think is where your desk was,
My
right?
desk was right under the window, yes. Yeah, and it'd get cold. There's heat. It
yeah,
would get
it's much warmer.
it would get cold, and I would sometimes have to type with gloves on.
Oh, I
So,
remember that.
yeah.
You had the fingerless gloves.
Yes, yeah. This was our storage
Yeah.
and our copy machine, and everything in the whole place hooked up on one power outlet.
Oh, that's right. It was all one outlet.
Yes. The copy machine that was over here.
So we had lots of extension
computer.
cords and power strips.
Yes. Yes.
For our whole
Yes.
office.
Yes, and when we were disliked by the treasurer, because it was the treasurer's office, and now it's the superintendent of schools, but we would blow the power if we had a space heater,
Yeah.
and we tried to warm up. Yes.
You couldn't
Yes.
be warm.
No.
Yeah, so we didn't have a ton of space to meet with volunteers or anything like that.
Anything.
And this was our space. I mean,
It was.
we didn't really have anywhere else to go.
We did our training, we did our interviews, we did all kinds of things in here once we finally had access to this room. And then, yeah. And so, our whole Christmas gift drive was stuffed in
Yeah,
here,
we
which
had-
is really hard to imagine now, because now it fills up so much more space.
Yep.
But we're serving a lot more kids. too.
Yes. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a challenge. But, you know, I mean, it was a beginning program, just getting started, and, you know, you have to start somewhere.
Some of the challenges that we faced during that time, of course, were always the volunteer load. So I think that you never have enough volunteers. Anytime you're working in an organization where it's volunteer run, you never have enough volunteers. So that's always been the challenge. Another challenge that we faced was funding. A lot of times figuring out where funding was going to come from. We didn't have our own 501c3 at the time, so we were under the umbrella of the United Way 501c3. So that created some challenges just in making decisions or, anytime we wanted to make a decision or move forward on something, we would have to go through a lot of different, the board of CASA and then United Way and things like that. So those were some of the challenges. And like I said, I think the biggest one that I remember is just never having enough volunteers. You want every child to be able to have that representation in court and to have their voice heard, their side of the story heard. And we weren't always able to provide that.
One of the challenges for us has always been trying to meet the number of children coming into foster care. But there were years where we did that pretty well. And then all of a sudden, around, I think it was 2013, when we first saw a spike in the kids coming into foster care. And then from 2014 forward, there was just a continual increase. When I had started with the program, I knew we needed to grow because I knew we needed to serve all the children in foster care. But I had envisioned maybe 150 kids in care. Certainly, we would never reach 200, was my thought. And now we're serving 310 children. It's really hard to imagine, and that really significant growth. It occurred starting in really in 2014 until now.
Well, the need for CASA's growth came from the increase in drug abuse and alcohol abuse, and that impact that it had on families and children.
So as the need was rising, we as a board knew that we needed to expand the program to provide more staff. Our staff oversee CASAs. They're the ones responsible for training them, helping them, answering tough questions, handling tough cases. And at the time, we had our staff were handling so many CASAs, and we needed to provide more staff so that we could distribute that workload evenly and to add more cases to that workload, serve more kids in our community who didn't have a CASA. And so we as a board made a real concerted effort to increase our funding in a sustainable way so that we could expand our staff and continue to have our staff expanded for years to come.
In our monthly meetings, we heard a lot about the numbers of kids that were entering the foster care system at no fault of theirs. And also the dilemma within the organization of needing volunteer coordinators, and they were regulated by, they could only supervise so many CASAs per volunteer coordinator. And there were so many kids entering the system, but CASA couldn't keep up with the demand. So as a board, we started looking at ways to expand the program.
Well, when I first came on to the CASA advisory committee, they were not handling all of the child abuse and neglect cases in Flathead County. And it was primarily due to the lack of funding. So I could see right away that we needed to change the model that CASA was operating under to raise more money.
So when we started, we were a partner agency of United Way. We had one employee, Jamie, who is still our executive director to this day. But in order to grow, we needed to raise more money. And United Way was great for initial funding, getting us started, kind of that administrative oversight that we needed. But in order to truly grow, we really needed to spread our own wings and become our own 501c3. And that's exactly what we did.
So I guess the way we approached that need to serve all children was to create a foundation that would become a fundraising arm of the current organization so that we would be able to raise funds more effectively. And as we became more independent, we would be able to control our own finances. Originally we were under United Way and they were the fiduciary agent, which was great. But as we became as the foundation came into being, that allowed us to look at each fundraising effort and see how effective it was, so that we could put our efforts in the places that were really getting the donations that we needed to serve all children.
Well, developing the foundation was an interesting proposition. I'd raised money in the past for Butte Family YMCA and University of Montana Foundation and others. And so it was fairly easy to get that money, and especially when people heard the story of what CASA did. The horrible things that the kids face when they're abused and neglected was an easy story to tell. And so people asked how they could help, and it worked out. The rest is history.
So our fundraising method when we were with the United Way was primarily passive giving. People in giving to the United Way could choose to give to CASA for Kids. We really didn't have any active independent fundraising efforts, but when we created Voices for CASA, our own 501c3 to fundraise for CASA, we were able to become more active with our donors and actually get to know our donors and talk about CASA and what we do. And once we have an opportunity to talk to people about CASA, the money began to flow.
About the time that CASA, the Voices for CASA, blended into the 501c3 for the CASA Flathead Valley, I left the board of CASA, but I never strayed too far in my support for CASA. In 2012, there was a group of my friends that we gathered together and we formed this Cycling for Children. And for 4 years, we ran this cycling event to benefit CASA for Children. And we ran a bike ride in Whitefish. You had your choice between 40, 70, or 100 miles. And each year it grew each year, but we had over 100 riders, and we raised a decent amount of money for CASA.
So some of the events that really helped CASA for Kids grow. Number one was getting the foundation up and running. And Paul Sullivan was the chairman of the advisory committee, and I was president of the Voices for CASA, and we worked very well together. And we were able then to make this happen. One of the big things that made a difference with CASA for Kids was our ability to hire a professional fundraiser. And we did that, I can't remember exactly, but about 2015. And then, and now we have Daniel Verardo is our fundraising guy and video photographer too.
So as far as CASA's development and growth, we're really blessed and lucky that Jamie is a tremendous grant writer. She has done a phenomenal job with that. That is a big piece of our funding. The other piece, the private fundraising, having a message like CASA has been great to get out and talk to the community.
One of the things that gave us a lot of confidence was the donation of a home that came in, and that was about a $250,000 impact on our balance sheet. And so the balance sheet now for CASA for Kids is very strong, and it gives confidence to the staff that they know that there's financial backing for what they're involved in. And I see that as really been a big impact.
So I first met Cindy Bassnett when she interviewed to become a volunteer with our program. And she served as a volunteer, had a couple cases, and then we had an opening for a volunteer coordinator, and she applied. And it was probably one of the best hires that I've ever made.
When I first came on staff with CASA, we had probably just a little above 60 advocates. And so with Jamie, myself, and one other staff member, we were able to kind of keep afloat. The
children coming into foster care really spiked at one point, and we needed to bring on more staff, and it was really apparent.
She's just a perfect fit for that role. She very much understood the role of an advocate, having been an advocate herself. She just has a great attitude about service to others. It's part of who she is as a person, whether it is with CASA or some other organization. I mean, it really doesn't matter. She just is a person who volunteers. So she really understood the role of a volunteer, which really helps when you're thinking about growing a volunteer program and what volunteers need for retention and support.
So it is challenging to do this work, and so most times an advocate will come on and they will take their first case, and some of them find that they aren't cut out to do this work long term, and so they'll have that one case and then move on to other things. But there are those of us that CASA just gets under our skin, and we see the need and we want to just continue to do this work. One of the things that makes us, I think, unique in a volunteering organization is just the sense of family and support, and that it's a team that is working hard together to meet the needs of the children. So
she brought a level of expertise about the role of volunteer and what they have to do. But she also brought this great understanding of how to support them and help them along the way. And it really has done wonderful things for our program.
With meeting the needs of every single child that comes into foster care, that was really a challenge for us because we did not have enough advocates to meet that need. And, you know, we're always lacking in enough people to meet the need. And so one of the struggles that we have is that our main purpose is to recruit, train, and support advocates to meet the needs of those kids and to go out and advocate for those kids. And what we end up doing, because we're required to serve every single foster child, is that staff then ends up trying to fill in the gap until we're able to find an advocate for the child. One of my main goals early on was to have an advocate for every single child within a certain period of time. And over the years, that timeline has grown to be shorter and shorter. I would love to have an advocate for every single child that comes into the foster care system within 30 days of entry. We have not met that goal yet, but that is what I'm currently striving for.
She has just been integral to the development of the program. Starting with that focus on volunteers and what it takes to develop a strong volunteer program.
Another thing that I have heard from the advocates is that they feel a sense of family when they come. And it's interesting, even when we get people from CASA programs that are across the nation from other areas, they'll swing in just to see what the CASA office looks like here. So it's a team effort and a family here locally, but even like nationally, you can sense that you're not alone in this work. So yeah, I think it's great.
So what was it like when you first moved in here, Jamie?
Well,
it was you and Lindsay?
It was, and we were so excited. It was so nice because we were starting to grow the program. I mean, we had actually just bringing Lindsay on opened up a lot of opportunities for us to be able to support more advocates. Because before, I mean, it was just a one-man show, one-person show. In fact, it was a half-time person. Mm-hmm. Then it was a three-quarter-time person, and then me full-time. So having her here full-time, we were able to expand, but we needed more space. I mean, we knew we had to have advocates come in, because that was in the old spot. The advocates would come in, and there was virtually nowhere.
No place for them to be.
Right, and so we couldn't really have private conversations. So there was a room across the way that we would go into. It was a shared conference room with family court services. And so anyway, we needed something. So this was really wonderful and luxurious, and we had, you know, this area. So then the advocates would come in and we thought, this is great. We're never going to outgrow it. But we kept getting more advocates because we kept having more children come into foster care, which is, of course, how we ended up with third person.
Right. So how many advocates did you have at that point in time, do you think, when you first moved into this space?
I don't know, maybe 20. Well, no, by then we probably had 50, I'm guessing.
So I think when I came on there was about 60.
Yeah.
60, 65.
Yeah, so probably right in there.
Yeah, one of the issues we had was the office space, and that was, it was too small for what was needed and the number of employees that CASA had grown into. And so we had looked around several options to move into other space. We finally decided that the Gateway Mall was a great place to be. And so then we went to work with the management at that time and got a bigger office available and remodeled and so on. It was a pretty slow process, but we finally got it done. And now, essentially, I think CASA's maybe on the verge of outgrowing that space and needs more space. So
painting it was one of the first things we did. It wasn't this color, but it was a neutral. And yeah, it was nice.
So I remember, so back here, in just this, remember we had this much space was our conference room. We had that little round table. And we called it our conference room.
Because we had desks that were bankers' desks that came out.
to back.
Yeah, it was huge. That took up so much space.
Yep, I remember Sean and I had bookshelves that were set between our desks, and we would kind of needle one another, like when we were on the phone having serious conversations, bounce paper wads off the wall at each other through the...
Yeah, so much professionalism.
Yes.
But that was why, see, and that's the thing is initially there wasn't a problem with confidentiality, really.
Because there was only the two of you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But then soon, you know, Sean would have somebody here working, you'd have somebody there working, we'd have somebody out there working, we'd have somebody over there waiting, we'd have, you know, and it just was, and we had to get out of this situation. When we started, I mean, I never imagined that we would end up in as much space as we're in. Right? It just didn't even, I never thought, of course, I never thought we'd serve over 300 kids.
Right.
Never. I think when I started, I think when we hit 100 kids, I thought, wow, we got a big program here.
What are we going to do? What are we going to do?
Yeah, I mean, it was like, wow, what are we
How
going to
do we adjust?
Yeah.
How do we pivot for this?
Yeah.
Do you remember when we were here and we were all dreaming individually, like what our new space could look like? When it was just a big, wide open room and we all had our sketch pads out, drawing, you know, offices, and how many people could we fit, and could we have our own conference room maybe? And it was just so, like, we couldn't even really envision what we have now.
No, and we've already, so I mean, we had, when we did it, I mean, our offices, we could have made them bigger, but we both knew that the chances that we were going to have to bring in more staff and grow the program, we had to make room. So thus we brought in the cubicles, plus we wired the conference room for the lines, and then the back, the file room, we brought in the wiring so we could turn that into an office, which we now have had to do.
Right.
But now it's a whole different mindset now, because now we know the program is growing.
Right.
And it will probably, unfortunately, I mean,
we'll outgrow the space eventually, and hopefully we won't have the children.
It all hinges on it hinges on the children in foster care, and that's the unfortunate factor. It's been multiple years now that we've been over 300 kids.
And you know, our community is growing, so you're exactly right. Like the mindset is different. It's like, how do we make this space functional so that we can operate in it now, but also grow?
This was a good visit, and I think I'm done. I think I'm getting just a smidge of anxiety.
Let's go home. Let's get out of here.
Let's do that.
pretty soon we were able to bring on Sean Carlin, we were able to bring on Daniel Verardo, and that was so much fun. Once we got a good team where Daniel and Sean were really meeting the needs of the advocates, I could kind of oversee a little bit more of the program on the advocacy side and assist Jamie slightly with the executive director role that she plays. So we each kind of started to develop our own role within the program, and our job descriptions were more delineated, whereas previously we just had 4 different hats that we put on to try and meet the needs of all the advocates. And so that was really exciting to get more staff. And then we were, the board actually came up with a great idea to get a program development coordinator. And I think when we got Alicia, she really helped us to grow a bigger vision for our donor relationships, which is just another relationship that, you know, we have and rely on, and it's just amazing to see how the donors come alongside as well. So anytime there's ever been a need in the program and in the Valley, it seems like just in the nick of time we get the right people to come alongside and help out and help us reach our goals and meet the needs of the kids. So now we have 3 advocacy coordinators, child advocacy specialists, and we've got a program development coordinator. We've just started a new program called Focus, which is assisting the youth that are transitioning into adulthood and independent living skills. So we brought on Cheyenne Clark to assist with that. CASA Today is an established program. We've got a really good, solid base of advocates that are ready to take another case. We've got a team here that is able to help with training and supporting them through the different challenges as they arise. We've got a team that is working really hard with the whole community to gain the support we need financially to do the things that we need to do. It's amazing to see a machine with different parts that can function and work together to meet the needs of the community in a way that we weren't able to 10 years ago.
Thinking back, I think I first got involved with CASA about 2011. I was asked to sit on the board of directors at that time, and I was serving as Kalispell Municipal Court judge. When I was at municipal court, I didn't fully understand what a CASA did. I think I still had a misconception that CASA were part of Child and Family Services, or CPS, that they were accompanying them when a child needed to be removed from a situation, and didn't quite understand the advocacy that the CASA provided to the court. But once I transitioned to district court, I was able to see the full function of a CASA and how important it is to the work that I do, and that they're separate from the department and have their own role and obligations that they perform for the court. The report writing from the CASA has changed over time. So we used to get a wide range of reports, and if somebody was a prolific writer, it would be a long report and a lot of detail. And what CASA's administrative staff has done now is kind of provided a template for the CASAs that gets us the important information that we're looking at of their interaction with the kids, how the kids are doing. We now get pictures of the children, we'll get drawings. They'll encourage the children to write the court a letter or a letter to their mom and dad stating how they feel so that they have a stronger voice in what we're doing. What's really important from my perspective that we see are these trusting relationships that the CASA form with the kids. And as our resources are shrinking, I find the cases that have the CASA assigned, those kids are getting a higher referral for services they need for the trauma therapy that they might need, or the art therapy, or the equine therapy, things that we might miss, and the department just doesn't have time. Their main focus, once the kids are removed, seem to be on the parents, where the CASA gives us that valuable insight as to what we need to be looking at to help the kids. As our caseload increases, what I have observed is that it's kind of a twofold for CASA to continue serving our growing population of these families, is that the CASAs that have been in the program for a while become mentors, and that seems to have grown and really provides some guidance and a resource to the newer CASAs. But along with that, the administrative staff has had to grow in order to continue the excellent training that our CASAs receive, and to support the CASAs so they can continue to do that dedicated work that we appreciate. My favorite cases in district court, where my passion are cases that involve children. So when I go out publicly and advocate for something, CASA is a natural fit for me. And how I'm involved in CASA, I'll speak at the graduations to the CASA. I also run a family treatment court, and CASA sits on part of our treatment team for the families that have substance use disorder that have had the kids removed for abuse or neglect. It's a team approach of providing wraparound services to these families that really enhance their treatment, allow them to engage in recovery and become phenomenal parents and get back on the road again. Jamie's been a phenomenal leader, and with her training and growth, she has grown with CASA and has always been willing to make the changes necessary. I think at times she thought it might sacrifice the program from taking it to be kind of a intimate, hands-on, where she was involved in every aspect. But I really believe as the program grew and the number of volunteers needed to staff the district court cases, Jamie was able to see the benefit of that and know that she couldn't be hands-on with every family, every volunteer, every judge, every case. But under her direction, CASA really has been able to flourish and provide that service.
I think at times she tended, and still does, I'm sure, tends to perceive the program and run the program in a way that comes from her personal involvement with children.
So change is inevitable, and the organization will continue to change and evolve as leadership changes. Our executive director will retire, in the next several years. And so that leadership will evolve and change.
I think she's done a remarkable job. Surprising that she's still here, to be honest with you. I'm sure at some point in time she's going to actually retire, but don't know when. But she's got a nice personality, I think, and she loves kids, which I think is probably the most paramount, and she can work well with people. So her leadership and her easygoing way with people, I think, has made the CASA volunteers comfortable from all of that I saw. And that was a huge plus for us as well. And she's always worked well with the court and worked well with me. I mean, she's been, she's a friend, as well as what I would consider a coworker.
My hopes are that CASA continues to serve as many abused and neglected children as possible in the community in a effective, efficient way.
It's so exciting what CASA has achieved, and it feels good to know I had some small part in that. And then the people who came after me carried it forward. It's still strong. They're stable. They're viable. 8 employees is something we never would have dreamed could happen back when we started it. So my hat's off to all of those people who continued to work hard for these kids, for CASA after I left. Very proud of everything they've done.
I believe that CASA's future is very bright. It has great leadership. It has a dedicated board that work, for its future.
My huge hope would be that CASA would be no longer needed. Having said that, I think that's probably the most unrealistic thing I can say, unfortunately. I can only hope that we continue to have the quality of volunteers that we've had.
My hopes for CASA's future is that we can keep a good staff that is motivated and anxious to work with volunteers to help these kids that have been abused and neglected. I think the staff is so important to our success, and then their impact on the volunteers is really, really important.
My hopes for CASA, I guess, are just that they would continue to be able to expand. I mean, I don't know if currently they're able to assign a CASA volunteer to every case that comes through the foster care system. I know foster care is just like busting at the seams, and so hope that they continue to gain awareness in the community, and that people would continue to step up to volunteer and be that voice for kids in the court system. I mean, that's one of the things that I think CASA really brings to this whole system, is they bring a humanity to the children who are actually involved in it.
Honestly, for CASA's future, I really hope that child abuse and neglect would go away, but it's not. And that's the unfortunate reality we live in. So honestly, my hope for CASA is that we are able to continue to be able to meet the need of our community and other underprivileged communities, to provide a voice for these kids in court, be someone for them, be there. It's so important, and we can really just change a child's story by doing that. And that's my hope, that we never have to say no to a single kid.
What I hope for the future of CASA is that the number of children entering the system in foster care will decrease as the children that we're serving now and have for several years break that cycle of child abuse and neglect, so that we're giving them the skills and the tools and the support to go out in the community and be good parents and have strong families, so that that number is actually decreasing instead of increasing.
I'm proud of where they've gone and what they've accomplished. It's been a lot of hard work, determination, tenacity, all those attributes. But it's really making a difference to an increasing number of kids. And I just think the world of CASA, and these kids are lucky to have them.
The future of CASA, or my wish list for CASA, would be that long after I'm gone, and those of us that were involved in CASA at an early level, is that it continues to grow and sustain and really educate the community about the needs these kids have, but also that it can grow and sustain and provide that meaningful work.
My hopes for CASA's future. I have a lot of hopes for CASA's future. I know that we are just now in mid-stride with getting our focus program off the ground. I would love to see CASA bring in more programs like that so we can really focus on different areas like the 0 to 3 group or middle-aged kids, high school kids. If we could get more specialized in meeting those kids' needs where they are, I think that would be really great.
I really am excited as I contemplate retirement in the future. I feel excited that I'm going to be able to leave the program in a really great position, and the excitement for me comes with watching what a new person with new energy and new ideas will bring to the program and where they'll take it. Because I think we're in a wonderful place, and it'll be exciting to see them continue to grow the program and build it and make it something that maybe I haven't visioned. So yeah, it's exciting to think about.